I was deeply touched on the night of the celebration in the center for the 40th anniversary that this center's been here by something that was said, and I'm going to share with you my hearing of what was said and my reaction to what was said. Because I'm not a tape recorder, or wow, that's old school. I'm not an electronic device that can record a voice. So I don't know what was exactly said, and that's the way it is with us. We have our own filters and we hear things. But during that ceremony, Dr. Reverend Carolyn McEwen, who is in the back here, who started this center, she was sharing some reflections, and I was listening to her, and she's one of my teachers from years back, and so she has a special place in my heart. And she was expressing gratitude for all the years that she was here, and she said something something like this about, "I am so grateful for your willingness to be present for my spiritual growth." Wow, I was so touched by that, and what she expressed there is this aspect of spirit. God, spirit, we look out there and we, can you help me? I need some help down here. Kind of going through it, or I'm working hard, I'm struggling, and whatever. We kind of look out. And I get that, because there is no container that you can put spirit in. But again, through my filter, what I realize is that this incredible connection that we have with each other, the capacity we have to, first of all, be vulnerable, which I think is a gift we have, because vulnerability allows us to open up and say, need some love here, kind of going through it. And then the willingness to step into that connection and to touch each other emotionally and spiritually. I think of it as the connection with, it's like a mathematical equation: vulnerability plus humility. Now, vulnerability is this idea of, wow, I'm kind of really going through something. I'm going through a challenge. I'm growing. I'm being my human self. And then humility is, but I'm willing to open up to it. And see, her acknowledgement of that had two pieces to it. She was thanking everyone for being present for it, but she was also acknowledging that she had opened up. And when the doors are open, then it goes both ways. Carolyn McEwen is an amazing teacher. But part of her ability to teach is that two-way openness. That's where we connect. So what does this make me think of? You ever heard of bonobos? They're kind of like chimpanzees. I listened to something that was connected to the TED Talk world recently. And a lot of people who work in the world of ologies, sociology, psychology, criminology, all the ologies. Sometimes those people who are at the higher levels of academia and stuff, they like to look at our primate ancestors and our primate cousins and say, what's going on with them, and what can we learn about ourselves from them? And the whole idea about somebody who'd come forward to look at the primates that we call our relatives was this idea of how do we interact with each other when there is what we would say difference within the same species. Does that sound familiar to us, right? Especially in this day and age. You turn on CNN lately? Yeah, a lot of differences, right? And so one study was looking at chimpanzees who are in the wild, and they say that when a troop of chimpanzees is out there in the world and they come across another troop of chimpanzees, and so they're obviously the same, but somehow they're different because they come from different places, the chimpanzees will start to become very aggressive, and they'll scream and cry at each other, and they will throw nasty things at each other, and they will posture, and they will expose themselves, and they will ridicule, and they will put each other down, and sometimes they can get kind of violent, actual physical violence with the other troop, and they'll do that, right? Okay? And so, the people studying the ologies go, well, that's really interesting, that they, so in the difference, there is this idea of becoming aggressive and trying to push someone else out or take ownership or, all that sort of thing. But then there's the bonobos, who are very similar to chimpanzees. In fact, if you were in a zoo, you might kind of mix them up. They're a little bit different. But there's something about them that's even deeper that's different. They talk about this idea that when bonobos they're out there and they run across another troop, so their troop is out there. There is a type of bonobo that the experts have identified as what they call a super groomer, or an over-groomer. What do I mean by that? All primates in the wild spend most of their days grooming each other. More than foraging, more than finding, more than eating, they groom each other. And so even though they do have spoken languages, so to speak, it's believed that part of the grooming, which is really good for them in terms of what they carry around in their fur that they don't like, but part of the grooming is the connection. It is touching each other, being present for each other. It is affection. It is connection. It is a form of intimacy. So in the case of the bonobos, not every groomer is created equally. We have super groomers or over groomers. They love to groom, and they're grooming everybody. And they're running around. They love to get their little fingers into everybody and hang out. And they tend to be very congenial. They tend to be upbeat. They tend to be kind of like metaphysicians. Okay? So imagine Reverend Carolyn surrounded by bonobos. And they've got their little fingers in her. They like her, right? They're connecting. Then you have the normal groomer. They're kind of into it. Yeah, I'm a bonobo. That's what I do. That's how we connect. Okay, intimacy. Yeah, I like you. Okay, All right. And then you got the underachieving groomers who will just do it if they have to. You know what I'm saying? Okay. But I want you to think about grooming for a moment from the standpoint of vulnerability and humility. So what if I'm a bonobo and I got some parts of me that I can't reach? But they're feeling pretty itchy back there. I got some termites or something in there, right? So I'm vulnerable. My humility is, hey, you think you could get back here? I got this spot back here, right? That's the vulnerability. So when one troop of bonobos comes across another, they notice that the super groomers, the great groomers, begin to go into the new troop. And the super groomers from the other troop begin to come into that troop. And they start to groom. And there's a grooming process going on for a while. And then the troops, which sort of remain separate, will slowly close together. And then the other grooming begins. And as they come together, then this is where they find their common ground. Imagine this. They find their common ground because of their greatest vulnerabilities, but their greatest willingness to open up to another. That's what Reverend Carolyn was talking about. And so today, this talk I'm giving, the name of it is Spirit Has Our Back, but my subtitle is, wow, Spirit Has My Back. Bonobos. Okay. Spirit Has Our Back, but my subtitle is Through Others and Our Own Receptivity. So, so when I do watch CNN or when I work with my clients or whatever, I am certainly aware that within the different troops of people, there are all kinds of divisions. And one of the things I know in the work that I do, we work very much around the two issues of vulnerability and humility, because that's where the magic happens. Vulnerability and humility. The vulnerability to say, I'm really struggling here. Something is bigger than I am. I'm hurting. I'm living in dis-ease. I'm living in discomfort. I have allowed this dis-ease and this discomfort to take me to places that have not been good for me. I'm struggling with decisions I've made around that. I've struggled with a life direction, and I need some help. One of the things that we all, I think we've all experienced this, is that when we are hurting and when we are not doing so well, we tend to sometimes want to emotionally isolate. And when we do that, not only does that become a lonely place to be, but I believe that it cuts us off from the real, the way that spirit among us as human beings can really show up. The givingness of spirit, the love of spirit, the caring of spirit, to simply come down into a place that is neutralized by vulnerability and humility. It is that piece of property that as human beings we can stand together. I believe it is holy ground. We talk about that idea. The holy ground of our vulnerability and our humility. I had the privilege of working with a young lady some years ago in the field that I work in, and she she belonged to a family. There were three children altogether in the family. She was the oldest, three daughters. She had a father who was a successful professional of some kind, very athletic person, very driven kind of person, and she found herself drawn to her father a lot. My client that I was working with was an amazing soccer player. In fact, she played at a college level of soccer, and she got that far up, and she obviously was a college-educated lady. And her father, when she was younger, would very often coach the young team she was on, and he was always there for her. She was very drawn to him. But there was another relationship that was kind of percolating there. And it was a relationship with her mother. And I found that when she was in treatment, most of the work we did was on mom's relationship, and it was centered in a particular place. Not only a physical place, but I would say a metaphorical place of healing. So I was talking to her one day, and I'm getting to know her, and I talk. Well, tell me, because obviously, because I was working with her, she had obviously developed some really big challenges in her life, and those challenges were starting to really break her life apart, and so she ended up coming to where I was. So we were talking about loss, and I said, what do you think, in terms of the way you've been living, what do you think the losses are? And she said something really odd, and she said, well, for a long time, I lost the puzzle table. I said, what do you mean the puzzle table? She said, well, once I became a junior high age person, my mom always loved to make puzzles, to put puzzles together. And at the very beginning of autumn and up into the very beginning of spring, in autumn, she would put up a card table in the corner of the family room, and she would have a puzzle. She'd put all the pieces there, and so she would, between autumn and spring, she would work on maybe, I don't know, 5, 10 puzzles throughout that time. Dump them out, put them together, and move on. And when and so the young woman I worked with, she loved her mom, but she'd never been really super close to her. She was closer to her dad. And this one day she came in, it was a Saturday, and her mom had put up the puzzle table, and she came over and said, Mom, can I help? Yeah. And so that began a tradition of she and her mom would, from time to time, and for any of you who've ever done that, I don't know how many of you have done it, but, it kind of sits there and, you go about your business. You may not do it for a day or two. Then all of a sudden you got some time. You kind of go over to the puzzle table. You kind of work on it, right? So that's the way it would be. It wasn't really scheduled. It wasn't really rigid or anything, but from time to time they'd find they'd both drift over there and they start working. And she said, while they were working with a puzzle, over the time she did that, she slowly got to know her mom. And she slowly got to know her mom in terms of her own vulnerabilities as a human being and some of the things that were kind of going on in the family with her dad and her sisters and her mom. And they would just work on the puzzle and they would talk and talk. And the woman who was my client, she found that her mom started to learn more about her. Because there's something about working together and just feeling comfortable, and the conversation starts to come out. And we relax and we allow ourselves to go into the vulnerabilities and then the humility, which was she started to open up to her mom for her mom's wisdom. She goes, I discovered my mom was really wise. My dad was smart. My dad was, talented, but my mom was really wise. And I started to discover my own wisdom at the puzzle table. Well, as time went by, this relationship grew, but then when my client began to have challenges in her life, she began to pull away from the puzzle table because out of shame, she didn't realize this when she was doing it, but out of shame, she began to step back from that. And because her mom didn't know how to deal with her, she began to step away. And the puzzle table kind of went back to mom only. The power of the love of spirit showing up at a puzzle table. And one of the things that she and I celebrated, that as she found sobriety, as she found recovery, and even though she had her own place in her own life, from time to time she would go back over, and now she could rejoin the puzzle table. As I said one day, I said, later on, she was someone I ended up working with for quite a while. She kept herself in treatment much longer than she had to be. And so it was fun to watch her grow. And so we were having kind of a gratitude conversation one day. I said, God, some great things are happening for you. What are you most thankful for? And she said, the puzzle table. I can go back to that place. There's a gentleman by the name of John Blofeld. And he wrote a book called Taoism. And John Blofeld is no longer with us. It's an old book. I think it came out in the early 70s or 80s. It's just something I really like. And there's a quote from him. And now in Taoism, when we talk about God or Creator, it's always referred to as the nature of things. You know what I mean? That's how they say it. Spirit, first cause, Creator. In Taoism, it's the nature of things. That's God. So John Blofeld said, through our devotion to an intuitive perception of the giving nature of things. Listen, the giving nature of things. So the nature of things is God, but he's saying the giving nature of things. Its outpouring of love can only be captured by one's own vulnerable and humble emptiness. I love that. The vessel's strength is its openness and its emptiness. For, what Dr. Carolyn was saying, because that statement she made was about her openness and emptiness. To receive. Have you ever tried to fill a glass that's already full? Can't do it. The openness and emptiness of the bonobo. The openness and the emptiness of this young woman. To receive what each and every one of us has the opportunity to give to each other. Its outpouring of love can only be captured by one's own vulnerable and humble emptiness, essential to any vessel, so that that love may enter unobstructed. And so what happens when we forget who we are, because I don't know, to whatever degree you are in this philosophy, you wonder, what in the world are they talking about over there at that center? Are they talking about salvation and stuff? No, because you already got it. But what happens when we struggle in life is because we forget who we are. We forget that we are the bonobo. We forget that we are the young woman. We forget that we're the minister who's opened up to other people. That's how we receive the givingness of Spirit. And in that way, that is our salvation. To remember who we really are. Because we are beautiful expressions of Spirit. Thank you very much, guys. All right. All right, thank you. All right, so I think I'm ready for some more. Where's Dallas go? Oh, he's back there. So, all right. Once again, Dallas.